2.5 years ago, a Vancouver mother named Tiffany Hill was killed by her estranged husband in the parking lot of her kids' elementary school.
She was given a no-contact order. For 64 days in a row, he violated that.
So Washington passed a law that lets courts put GPS ankle monitors on those accused of domestic violence.
It can be a life or death situation, and it may be the difference in giving them the time that they need to get support, get resources, get into shelter.
But we discovered many counties aren't even using these tracking devices. The biggest reason? Cost. Here's the story. And welcome to The Story. I'm Ashley Korslund. Pat has the night off. All the ways to communicate with us are at the bottom of your screen. You can send an email to thestory@kgw.com, use the hashtag #TheStoryKGW on Twitter, or leave us a voicemail. Just call our number, 503-226-5090. So 2 years ago this month, Washington Governor Jay Inslee signed the Tiffany Hill Act into law, a big step toward helping victims of domestic violence. It was spurred by the murder of a Vancouver mother. The law allows for courts to order accused abusers to wear GPS ankle devices that can be monitored by officials and then linked to an app on the victim's phone. They would get an alert when an offender is near them. So here we are, 2 years later. We wanted to look into whether the law is actually helping victims in the state and whether courts are ordering the monitoring in domestic violence cases. And the answers we got were not all that impressive. But before we dive into that, let's recap what got us to that point. So how did we get here? Tiffany Ojeda Hill was a Marine and a mom to 3 kids. In September 2019, police arrested her husband, Keeland Hill, after he pushed her into a wall and tried to keep her from calling 911. The next day, he was released from jail and told not to contact Tiffany. Keeland violated the no-contact order several times in the months after his arrest.
She was given a no-contact order. For 64 days in a row, he violated that.
He also tried to buy a gun, but failed the background check because of the domestic violence case. In November of 2019, detectives found a GPS tracker on Tiffany's car. Officers arrested Keeland Hill again, and investigators determined that Tiffany was in extreme danger.
The state believes that if the defendant is released, he will kill the victim.
Prosecutors asked that Keeland Hill's bail be set at $2 million because of that danger, but a judge set it at just $250,000. Keeland bailed out of jail on November 21st and murdered Tiffany 5 days later. Tiffany was shot in front of her 3 children and her mother in the parking lot of Sarah J. Anderson Elementary, where Tiffany's kids went to school.
I tried to save my baby. I came home here to break a home with me and the kids. I knew something was wrong and going on.
Keeland Hill led deputies on a chase and then killed himself. In 2020, Washington Governor Jay Inslee signed an Offender Alert Act into law, named after Tiffany Hill,
who did everything possible to protect herself. This tool wasn't available, but it might have saved her life.
It allows judges to order accused abusers to wear GPS ankle devices that can be monitored by officials and linked to an app on the victim's phone.
You can actually look at GPS coordinates and points on a map to find out where an offender is located.
And that's how we got here. Okay, so clearly the Tiffany Hill Act is an important piece of legislation, and the technology could mean the difference between life or death for some victims. Tiffany's loved ones say technology like that could have saved her had it been available to her. And many other advocates who helped victims of domestic violence feel the same way. Now, oftentimes when a law like this is passed, we see a lot of fanfare and media coverage. Here at KGW, we must have done at least a half dozen stories about it. But what happens after the cameras stop rolling and the politicians go back to their offices and stop talking about this new legislation? What actually becomes of the implementation portion of a new law? And who does the follow-up? Well, that's what we wanted to find out. So last November, I reached out to all 39 counties in Washington. I emailed or called prosecuting attorneys or court administration offices. And my question was simple. How many times has your county ordered these tracking devices permitted by the Tiffany Hill Act? Frankly, I didn't know what kind of response I would get, if any at all. But in the end, I heard back from a little less than half. We made a map to show you. The question marks are the counties that did not respond. I'm looking at you, King County and Spokane County, who, by the way, I contacted nearly a dozen times with no answer. But of those who did respond to me, almost none of them are utilizing this law. The exception is Clark County, which has more than a dozen offenders being monitored. And that makes total sense because the law originated out of Clark County, where Tiffany Hill lived. I asked the rest of the counties around the state why they are not ordering this monitoring. And well, their answers varied, but cost was the biggest barrier. So the way it works is that the offender in a domestic violence case has to foot the bill for this monitoring, which can cost up to $20 a day. So many courts are apprehensive to order it if a defendant can't afford it. Another reason, some courts cite lack of access to vendors, especially in more rural parts of the state. We checked, though, there are 5 approved vendors, and they say they do cover the whole state, so that should not be a barrier. A couple more responses we got. Some jurisdictions say were just simply not aware the law was even passed in the first place. With the pandemic, many training seminars meant to educate courts and judges on new legislation, well, they were put on hold. And then lastly, some prosecutors told me that they would like to see this technology being issued, but judges just will not order it. All right, so fast forward to this month, almost 6 months since I first started working on this investigation. I reached back out to a bunch of those prosecutors and court administrators to see if they had since learned of any new cases using the Tiffany Hill Act. And still, the answer is no. None of them are. One county said it hopes to soon, but that's about it. So really, all of this sounds like a lot of government inefficiency, a major slowdown in the process of implementing an important new law. So either it's a lack of education or access in providing critical protection to victims. And this is all at a time when domestic violence advocates say they are seeing more people seeking help from abusive situations.
In some places we're seeing, data looks like it's going down because people haven't been able to access services. They haven't been reporting, they haven't been calling for help. And in other communities, we're seeing numbers way, way up. So, I don't have the numbers to say for sure. What I hear from programs, what I hear anecdotally from programs throughout our state is that the levels of violence that folks experience are increasing, due to a number of factors, stressors in the home, economic instability, crises like this just kind of create a perfect storm for violence to escalate.
That is Elizabeth Montoya with the Washington State Coalition Against Domestic Violence. I asked Elizabeth her thoughts on the lack of awareness and the lack of follow through when it comes to putting this law into practice.
So what I would say is, it doesn't surprise me that it has not been implemented, but only because we know that we know and we have seen that it is a struggle to get these things implemented. And so that's something that, we're always kind of thinking about as these kinds of laws move through the legislature. There are so many really important and really good ideas out there to address domestic violence and to respond to it effectively, but we also really have to think about what is implementation going to look like, and are communities going to implement it, have the capacity and willingness to follow through.
Exactly. So let's talk about the follow through. That's where Republican State Senator Linda Wilson comes in. She's from Southwest Washington and originally sponsored the Tiffany Hill Act, as she does a lot of work with domestic violence causes. Last fall, I told her how almost no counties are taking advantage of the law. Now, she could have blown us off or said, "Not my problem." But instead, she did something about it. In the last few months, she went back to the legislature and got almost $2 million from the state's $15 billion budget surplus allocated to helping Washington counties order this GPS monitoring. This money would essentially help offset the cost in cases where an offender can't afford it themselves. That means cost, in theory, should not be an issue anymore.
Why did you go ahead and seek this funding in the first place this year?
Because it's always been on my mind. It was always part of the bill, and it was always an important part. I don't want money to interfere, be a reason why someone is not able to get to the monitoring. We know that in this case, because of Tiffany Hill, we know that we feel quite confident that she would have lived if she had this. And I hear from women all the time, and I know how important this is, and so I don't want money to get in the way. So I just continued to ask for it, and we had a healthy budget this year, so we were able to do it.
And as someone who really passionately pushed for this law, is that frustrating to you that there is a lot of red tape and there seems to be a breakdown in possibly communication between the court system in the state and prosecutors and courts around the state of Washington? Would you like to see that work more effectively?
Absolutely, because we know how important that this particular type of technology is, right? And how it helps women and, gives them a little more peace of mind and protects them and their families. So yes, it does frustrate me. I see this happening all the time. I'm very thankful that Clark County was the first to implement it, because they're actually they're doing such a great job with it that other counties can learn from that. And so I would like to figure out a way to get that information out there. I know that the monitoring company I talked to yesterday said that King County just last week came on board with the victim notification monitoring. So King County is a very large jurisdiction, right? So I'm hoping that when they start using it, maybe others, through just discussions with other, judges and prosecutors, that they'll start talking about it.
All right, so some good news there. Now, there is still legwork, though, that needs to be done before counties can get access to that money. Senator Wilson says the administration of courts plans to have a meeting in May to figure out how the money will be dispersed. But hey, it's a start. We will, of course, be following this story to make sure there is follow through.
The Pacific Northwest became infamous for eco-terrorism in the 1990s and 2000s.
You create an atmosphere of threat that says if you're an entity out there, if you're somebody else who's destroying the natural environment, you may be considered the next target.
20 years later, a member of the Earth Liberation Front was just convicted after more than a decade on the run.
Davey has evaded capture for more than 12 years.
When the story continues.
Back and keep sending your questions and your comments to the story at kgw.com, or give us a call and leave a voicemail at 503-226-5090. So what makes someone a terrorist? No doubt there are things that come to your mind, anything from the September 11th attacks to the insurrection at the U.S. Capitol last year. But depending on your political leanings, you might see things a little differently. In the late 90s, though, it was a string of attacks on property that had the FBI concerned here in the Northwest. Let's set the stage by going into the KGW vault. In the late 90s and into the early 2000s, around 24 people known as the Family started attacking property, some of it owned by the government, some of it owned by private companies. They set fires, made bombs, left graffiti and other vandalism, all in the name of the environment and animal rights. They were affiliated with the Earth Liberation Front and the Animal Liberation Front, and they did a lot of damage too across 5 states, including Oregon and Washington. The FBI says the group called it direct action. They wore dark clothing and masks, and they used code names to refer to one another. They created dangerous situations too, causing millions of dollars in damage to property, but they never killed a person. So when the FBI started hunting them down, many of them had already fled the country. The FBI has rounded most of them up. About 18 people affiliated with the group have gone through federal court. The latest is someone named Joseph Dibby, who pleaded guilty just last week to arson charges. Dibby was convicted of 2 arsons in particular. A fire at the Cavill West meatpacking plant in Redmond in 1997 and a barn in California owned by the Bureau of Land Management in 2001. He spent the last 2 decades on the run around the world until he was eventually captured in Cuba in 2018. But not everybody agrees with the terrorism label on the family. A former FBI special agent told OPB last year that these environmental crimes got a lot of attention because they targeted government institutions and wealthy companies, but that there was never a homicide associated with the family. But the FBI says anything that has political or social objectives meant to coerce government or civilians is domestic terrorism. Now, there's only one more member of the family out there, a woman named Josephine Sunshine Overraker. The FBI says she could be just about anywhere, working as anything from a firefighter to a massage therapist to a sheep herder. Well, still ahead here, a way for people living on the streets to get job skills.
Like, I got here and I was hopeless. You know, I was a hopeless drug addict, and this program gave me some hope.
How the Community Volunteer Corps helped. Okay, we spend a lot of time talking about solutions for getting homeless people off the streets, and most of that is focused on housing. But another really important step is helping people find jobs. Blair Bass checked out a program in Portland that teaches people job skills through volunteering.
They help build us up and make us feel important and special.
A step in the right direction. For 5 hours today, the volunteers cleared out drainage at Joseph Woodhill Park. This type of manual labor teaches them how to work with others, follow directions, and time management.
We have like a very low barrier experience to where people can come, volunteer, know that they can show up consistently. So when it comes time to getting a job, they can feel good about it.
Jonathan Wall graduated from the program in 2015. Now he runs it.
It feels amazing, you know, and it's one of the stories I like to tell people when they're going through the program, that if, hey, I was where you were at, if I can do it, so can you.
It's an opportunity to learn how to live life and recovery before having to involve work.
Haley Scott is a recovering alcoholic. She joined the program about 4 months ago.
I'm becoming more reliable for showing up on time. That's always been one of my faults.
She's about to graduate from the program and dreams of becoming a flight attendant.
I want to build a really firm foundation in my recovery that I can then translate into my working life.
People are willing to work. People want to work. Most people do.
Ronald Brown lived on the streets for 4 years. Today is his first day volunteering in the parks.
I was very depressed. So I think what the value of this program is, it gets people out.
Like, I got here and I was hopeless. You know, I was a hopeless drug addict, and this program gave me some hope.
Right now, the program is helping about 100 people. In the past 13 years, volunteers have put in more than 170,000 hours. Nearly 2,000 have graduated.
We've had people that go through our program that are now portfolio managers. We've had doctors go through, nurses, accountants. Like, this is a stepping stone for people, and like, this may be the beginning, but it is definitely not the end.
I have a better chance at a successful life, and I'm so excited for that.
One thing that's important to mention is the program relies on community donations. They say the only way they can continue to help people get off the streets and into full-time jobs is if they get the proper funding. You can find information on how to donate on our website, kgw.com. Blair Best, KGW News.
Well, last night on the show, we took you on a tour of Vancouver's newest Safe Stay community. It's an organized tiny home village that gives homeless people a place to live. Well, it officially opens tomorrow, but today some of the residents got to see their new living spaces before they move in. We talked with a man who told us more than anything, he is glad to have a place where he can keep his belongings safe.
It's more worrying about my stuff than where I sleep. It's easy to find a place to sleep as long as it's out of the wind and rain. That's easy. It's keeping all your things not getting stolen, losing them, people walking off with their stuff. That's more about it. I'm kind of tired of being homeless. That's kind of what it was. Yeah. And at least this will help me out until hopefully I get into housing, which, fingers crossed on that.
Yeah, the village is run by Living Hope Church and is on city-owned property. It's off of East 4th Plain in 4th Plain Boulevard. Vancouver, by the way, has dedicated $1 million to keeping the place running for up to 7 years. It'll hold up to 40 people and their pets if they have them. Well, for this week's Hey Help campaign, we are asking you to donate to Outsiders In. It's a nonprofit based in Vancouver, and it helps run the city's other Safe Stay community that opened last December. If you'd like to donate, just hold your phone's camera right up to the QR code on your screen, or you can go to kgw.com/heyhelp. All right, keep sending your questions and your comments to the story at kgw.com. We're going to dive into the history of how Oregon got its name right after this. Well, we all know how the state of Washington got its name, right? Obviously, the country's first president, George Washington. But have you ever wondered how Oregon got its name? Devin Haskins decided to find out.
Oregon is one of the 10 largest states in America in size, but one of 5 that the name's history is a mystery.
It's an old word that has a kind of contested and mysterious etymology.
And that's also what brings the curiosity. This is Edwin Battistella, an English professor at Southern Oregon University.
That's sort of the allure of it. I mean, it's one of those sort of great mysteries, and it always gives you something to think about and to dig into.
For decades, Oregon's etymology has engrossed even the most amateur of investigators. Many have tried, but no one yet so far has solidified an answer. A write-up in the 1920 Oregon Historical Society's Quarterly says it's a Native American word, but the author also notes it's suggestive and not to be considered exact history. The next year, it was the subject of an essay contest put on by the OHS, the winner taking home $60.
Over the years, there's been a bunch of wild guesses too, from oregano to the Spanish kingdom Aragon, a French word meaning hurricane, and the Spanish word orajon, which means
big ears, which was, again, this was a sort of folk etymology that people had in the 19th century.
Ultimately, those have all been debunked. As far as the written word goes, most widely noted comes from British soldier Major Robert Rogers.
He was a colonial soldier in 1765 who wrote a proposal to King George III to fund an expedition to find the Northwest Passage by way of the river the Indians call Oregon.
That river as we know it today was the Columbia. Years later, another explorer, Jonathan Carver, detailed his travels to the River Oregon in his journal.
So it was known in the late 1700s as a name.
So we know it was written about, even put on a map, as you can see, though with a different spelling.
That's sort of where part of the mystery comes in. Where did that word come from?
Ultimately, no one really knows for sure where Oregon came from.
We're sort of at the point of, hoping that someone somewhere will find another map or a letter, or you never know what somebody's going to find in their attic.
One thing they think is for sure,
it's pretty clear it's from a Native American source.
And that's kind of what's in a name.
All right, let's throw some theories at you. One of the more plausible ones that they seem to like is that it means River of the West. And that's been noted on a few maps from the early years, as well as in Jonathan Carver's journals. Another they like is that it's adopted from native tribes on the East Coast and traveled west. Either way, there's still a lot to learn about Oregon's origins. I'm Devin Haskins, KGW News.
Well, I guess maybe we'll never know. Hey, that's the end of our show today. Thanks for watching. The news at 6:30 starts now.
This is KGW News at 6:30.